Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Sweat, and I'm the product manager for ACCTivate. Today, we're going to spend about an hour talking about sales tax automation and online sales tax calculation that is now available in ACCTivate 9.0. We're going to spend time today doing a presentation giving you some background on sales tax, and then we'll actually jump right into a demo and show you the product and show you how it works in ACCTivate. So I just want to get started with a recap of a survey we did on our January 2014 webinar on ACCTivate 9.0. We asked our customers, what is their current sales tax situation? How are you currently charging sales tax to your customers? And we got some interesting results. This is what we expected, that about 60% of our customers are charging sales tax. Now, ACCTivate was originally designed for wholesale distribution clients that don't really have retail operations. And we saw that change over the last 5 years with the advent of e-commerce. And ACCTivate has built-in integrations with a lot of web stores such as Magento, Volusion, Amazon.com, eBay, and so on and so forth. With those integrations, we found that a lot of our customers are charging sales tax to lots of different jurisdictions. What's going to happen is in ACCTivate, if you are charging sales tax, you have to manage your sales tax in QuickBooks and maintain this huge list of all the sales tax jurisdictions that you have to deal with. Now, we do realize that 25% of you are only charging the tax rate for your local office, but that's probably going to change in the future, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. What we found that created the need for this product that we built is that there are over 11,000 tax jurisdictions in the United States alone. Now, we're in Texas, and the state of Texas is huge. And if you look at the map, there are probably 500 or more sales tax jurisdictions in our state alone. And we fall into that second category on the prior slide, where we're only charging sales tax for our Arlington-based office. Now, that's not actually correct. We're supposed to be charging sales tax based on where we ship the product to throughout the state. However, the tax laws have passed the Senate and are getting through to the House. Currently, we don't actually have to. There's no enforcement of it, but that's going to change very soon, and we are prepared, and you'll be prepared with ACCTivate. And what we did was we decided, instead of going out there and trying to create this whiz-bang automatic sales tax calculation system within ACCTivate, we'd be crazy to do that. So we partnered with Avalara, who's the leader in online sales tax calculation. They do all sorts, everything with sales tax, they are the leader. And it's also good to know that they are integrated directly into QuickBooks. So a lot of customers that we're finding have experience with them, and they said, you should integrate with Avalara. So we didn't just pick a name out of the hat. We went with a company out there that's building the best product. The AvaTax integration in ACCTivate does three key things. We're mostly concerned with sales tax rate calculation. So no matter where you ship the product to, where you ship it from, the sales tax rates are going to be automatically calculated for you. So you don't have to figure out whether it's 8% or 7%. The system will do it for you all automatically with no lookups or nothing. Also, Avalara manages certificates such as exemption certificates. So if you are doing resell, you're supposed to manage those resell certificate numbers or government contract numbers, that sort of thing. That's a big thing they do. And then lastly, probably the most important, is once you get into that national sales market and you're selling online everywhere in the United States, they will also file your tax returns for you to all these states. So your sales tax liability, you don't have to run that report in QuickBooks and manually write checks. They'll actually do it for you. So before we actually show the ACCTivate demo, I want to introduce to you Jordan Lang from Avalara, and he's going to spend a few minutes to introduce the product and show you what's available and kind of how Avalara works. And then we'll get back to ACCTivate, and I'll show you a demonstration.
Perfect. Hey everybody, my name is Jordan Lang. I'm here today from Avalara. I'm going to show you how our AvaTax solution is going to interact with ACCTivate after Brian does a quick demo here in just a few moments. But first, let's go over the challenges of sales tax compliance really quickly. Brian already touched on it, but let's go ahead and just expand it out really quickly. Well, the first challenge around sales tax is nexus, and that's just where do you have to register to collect and remit tax. Now, it seems pretty simple, but it's actually fairly hard for organizations to determine exactly where they need to collect sales tax. The reason why is they have to take into account their business processes, and where they have people located and where they send people to help solicit sales. And if you're a web-based company, you also have to worry about things like click-through Nexus. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about Nexus, but I will say Brian touched on current legislation that is sitting in front of, at this time, the House, and it's something called the Marketplace Fairness Act. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I will say that the Marketplace Fairness Act is requesting that any company that sells over $1 million in revenue outside of their home state should have to collect and remit sales tax on all sales, no matter whether they have Nexus in that state or not. Now, this has already passed in the U.S. Senate, and it's been sitting in the House for quite a few months now. And the reason why is because there's been a lot of stipulations about what exactly is the right size, for example, of a company that should have to collect and remit sales tax on all their orders. Currently, that threshold of dollars that determines the size of an organization is only $1 million. But there's been a lot of clamoring for larger dollar amounts. In fact, some companies even asking for up to 10 million plus. So it's really not a question, I don't think, of if we're going to see the Marketplace Fairness Act or a bill that's very similar to it pass. It's really just a question of when are we going to see that happen. And the reason why is because technology has really eased the burden for collecting sales tax across the country, and it's made the Commerce Clause, which is the clause that has inhibited national sales tax compliance, less compelling overall as an argument. And it's all based on technology. So once you determine where you have to collect sales tax, you need to know what rate to charge. And just like Brian went over, there's over 11,000 taxing jurisdictions in North America, and you got to keep them up to date and make sure that you're properly charging them, because in any given year, roughly 20% of them will change in one way, shape, or form. That can be a rate, that can be a boundary, it can be a combination of things. After that, there's product and service taxability that you need to worry about. Now, if you sell tables and chairs, and you sell them into 5 states that you have to collect tax into, you probably don't have much of a product or service taxability challenge. The reason why? Because they're tangible property. Tables and chairs, they're considered taxable to all taxable customers. However, let's say you sell tables and chairs and cubicles, and you provide installation services on those cubicles, and you sell them to those same 5 states. Well, now you've got a real sales tax challenge. And the reason why is because you have to know whether or not all the states you collect tax into have taxability associated with the installation of tangible personal property, meaning the installation of your cubicles. And if you didn't know that, and you determined that you weren't going to charge tax in any of those states, chances are you'd be wrong in at least 2 of them, because roughly half the states here in the country tax the installation of tangible personal property. What's the next challenge? Well, there's tax exemption certificates. Now, some people on the call might not think it's that hard to get that occasional tax-exempt certificate from their customers, and the answer is you might be right. But if you have multiple tax-exempt customers that you're always dealing with and trying to get those certificates, or if you haven't done a very good job at collecting those certificates or making sure that they're up to date and not expired, you can have a huge challenge in front of you if you ever are audited. Because it's one of the favorite things for auditors to do, is take a look at exemption certificates that companies have on file and determine if they're proper and if they have any expired certificates on hand. Because if you got expired ones on hand, you're going to get X number of days to get new ones, and if you don't get them, you're going to be held liable for sales tax that was not collected on those invoices for companies that you hold expired certificates for. And then the last challenge, what we like to say it all boils down to, is sales tax returns. We like to call it the most dreaded job in accounting. Sales tax returns are that thing that you're always under the gun to get done every month, and if you get them done on time and done correctly, well, great job. You're adding absolutely no value to your organization. But if you get them done incorrectly or late, that's when you get hit upside the head with the baseball bat. And that's because you're going to be charged penalties and interest for not getting those done on time. If you've got a process in place that has really not had you run into that, well, that's great. But if that process that you have in place is dependent upon one person or a team of people that might eventually maybe move their way up in the organization or move their way out from the organization onto a different job, it's always going to return back to a CFO or a controller or maybe even an owner to make sure returns are done on time and done correctly. Companies usually take a step back and they look at all these challenges and they ask themselves, is there a way to cost-effectively manage all this risk and the compliance associated with sales tax? And that's usually when they come looking for a solution like AvaTax. I'm just going to go into a quick little overview of Avalara and our AvaTax solution, and after that we're going to jump right into ACCTivate and we're going to show you how this works. So, the best way to understand AvaTax and Avalara is to hear the story of how we actually got started. Now, back in the late 90s, our founder built a sales tax engine for an e-commerce company that had nationwide nexus requirements. What he learned when he did that was that if he could create a tax engine that was accessible via the internet, that he would have a great solution for small and medium-sized businesses. Really, all that had existed up until then was expensive on-site software that took tax professionals such as himself to keep up to date and maintain. And then it took IT just to keep a server up and running so your tax engine worked. He knew that as long as his tax engine was capable of handling all the facets of sales tax, meaning the calculation of rates, the product and service taxability, and handle returns, that he'd have a great solution for the small and medium-sized business market. He also knew that it had to be as plug-and-play or as off-the-shelf as possible when it came to integrating it with multiple different platforms. Well, needless to say, he kind of hit the nail right on the head. Avalara has grown to become one of the fastest growing, or Avalara has become one of the fastest growing private companies now here in the U.S. for the past few years. And we now have over thousands and thousands of customers that use our solution on multiple different platforms. We also have over 300 different connectors, or those pre-built integrations that I was talking about. We integrate with all the major ERPs in the mid-market and smaller spaces, such as QuickBooks, like Brian already mentioned, as well as Sage, Intact, Epicor, SAP, and the list goes on. We also integrate with numerous e-commerce shopping cart solutions, including Magento, the Mozu platform from Volusion, and multiple other options, including 3D Cart, ShopSite, and many others. And just to give you an idea of the size of the operation we're doing in terms of calculations for our customers, we're handling billions and billions of sales tax calculations every year for our clients. And we're filing hundreds of thousands of tax returns every year for our client base. And lastly, just a little fun fact. In 2012, through all the operations of Avalara, we collected and remitted back to the different states here in the U.S. over 5% of all the sales tax that was collected in the country. It's the first time we'd ever achieved that number, and we do like to share it. And here's my last slide before we jump into a demo, everybody. How does AvaTax actually work? Well, in ACCTivate, this would be ACCTivate on the left. It would be anywhere where sales tax is calculated. So let's say this is an invoice. You've created it like you always have. You save your invoice. It's going to call out to our AvaTax solution in the cloud. It's going to go through these 4 different criteria, which are considered a best practice sales tax transaction, and then it's going to return that amount to the invoice. That all happens within a couple seconds. Over here on the right is the other piece of the puzzle: the creation, the filing, and the remission of sales tax returns back to the states and other jurisdictions. So this is a pretty simple diagram, everybody, but it does a great job at showing exactly how our AvaTax solution works. So I hope it makes sense. Now, Brian?
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah, this is a good slide before I jump right into the actual demo. ACCTivate has fully integrated these capabilities. So the address validation, the nexus rules are managed within AvaTax, so are the taxability rules, sourcing rules. But ACCTivate takes all that into consideration using the AvaTax engine. And I think that key word is the second heading at the top. It's a tax engine in the cloud. And again, the importance of this is you do not have to manage all this. There's hundreds and potentially thousands very soon of sales tax jurisdictions in your system. Thank you again, Jordan, for the wonderful introduction to AvaTax. I think I couldn't have said it better, and we're just everything we learn about Avalara, it's fantastic. They do a really good job, and again, there's no surprise that they're the leader in online sales tax and management. As we start the demo, I do want to go over just some basics before we show you the screens. This again, it's in the ACCTivate 9.0 software, so you will need to upgrade to ACCTivate 9.0. In addition to that, you will need to buy the AvaTax module. So it is an add-on module just like everything else in ACCTivate. And the reason why it's not a core system feature is we do understand that not all of our customers need this functionality today. We think everyone will in the future, but for now, pretty much just like every other module in ACCTivate, it is an additional add-on. So you'll need to contact our sales team first, and we'll provide you some more information toward the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's get started with the presentation. Okay, so here we are in our ACCTivate 9.0 dashboard, and I'll just close that out. And we'll get started right at the customer information window. So, the first thing to placing sales orders, obviously, is having customers. So we'll just start off and enter a new customer, and we'll set this one up as, it doesn't really matter. The name of the company doesn't matter. This is where AvaTax is already getting started here. So one of the first things we like about Avalara, of course, is that we don't have to fully verify and type in the address. We can actually just get started by putting in, let's say, Six Flags Drive. This is our office location here in Arlington, and we know that's in Arlington, Texas. I don't really know the zip code. I don't need to know it. I can try to type it in, of course. But as I move off that field, you'll see that it automatically, I just hit tab, I did not type that in, and ACCTivate automatically goes out to Avalara and validates the address and provides it back into the ACCTivate system. Now, of course, we don't get in your way. We're not going to have a pop-up window every single time you type in an address. The only time you'll actually see a pop-up confirmation is if you mistype something. So let's say we think this is in 76010. It's right down the street. That's probably the address. Our address validation will pop up immediately and tell you that here's the suggested recommended address. You can simply press return on your keyboard, or you can click yes, and that will accept the address and overwrite it into ACCTivate. You don't have to take the recommendation, but again, if you are using Avalara, and more importantly, if you're shipping using UPS or FedEx, you really want that address to be accurate. So it's very important to turn on the address validation. Okay, there are options if you're shipping international. We understand that international addresses are sometimes very difficult to validate. So in configuration management, you decide which countries you would like to do validation on. So for example, if we were also selling into South Africa and shipping internationally, you may want to set up the South Africa country to be exempt from the AvaTax address validation. So address validation is really good for US and Canada, maybe all of North America. It depends on what kind of addresses you're doing, but primarily US and Canada. Okay, so we'll save that. Once we've got the customer, we don't need to do anything with the address. This is also going to help you do better mapping. So the map button is going to do a better job if you have an accurate address. So if I go into Google now, so if we actually go to Google Maps, ACCTivate automatically will take you right to Google Maps. And by having that perfect address, that validated address, it'll let you look at where your customers are located. So if you're doing mail order or phone-in orders, it's always nice to take a look at where your customers are, get a good idea of how big their business is, or maybe even talk about the location. Hey, I noticed you guys, for example, this office is right down the street from the Cowboy Stadium. So, maybe you'll talk to them about the Cowboy Stadium. So again, address validation is a big deal, and AvaTax brings that into ACCTivate. Okay, so the next step, we'll go ahead and create a sales order. So we'll go to sales order. And obviously the address comes right in from the customer. It's already been validated, so there's no additional pop-ups or anything. Everything looks really good here. We'll go ahead and sell a few products here. Now, just to make this a little easier to explain, I'm going to change the price just for the demo to $1 each. That way, for those of you that are not mathematicians, it's a lot easier to see the tax calculations. So if we sell a $100 item, we're going to go ahead and save that order. The tax will be calculated when you save the order, and it's $8.25, which happens to be 8.25%. Now, most of you probably don't live in North Texas, so you don't realize that that is not the sales tax rate for Arlington. That's actually the sales tax rate for Fort Worth. And the reason why that's important is that Avalara is doing sales tax at the line level, which is actually a little better in terms of the way ACCTivate works. So if you look at the details here, we are shipping this product from our Fort Worth warehouse, and we're actually selling it out of our Fort Worth branch. So in this case, the sourcing rule is that we are charging the origin sales tax, which is Fort Worth. Now, those sourcing rules vary by state, by jurisdiction, and you will need to configure that with AvaTax. And I believe the built-in settings are pretty good. Again, you'll define your Nexus rules, all of your tax rules with the Avalara implementation group. Okay, so we sell the Fort Worth and it comes out at 8.25. Now, if I were to ship this from our Arlington warehouse, then our sourcing rules show the origin address is going to be in Arlington. Now, because it's shipping from Arlington, it's actually going to be 8%. So our sales tax rate is actually 8% versus the Fort Worth 8.25. And you'll see that right here. It's $8. Now, this is a pretty rare circumstance, but let's say we ship 100 from Arlington, and then let's ship 1,000 from Fort Worth, because that's a large quantity. We can't pull that from our smaller Arlington warehouse. So we'll go through here, go ahead and put in the price, $1,000. Now when we do that, $1,000 will be subject to 8.25%, and then $100 of that will be subject to the 8% sales tax. This isn't very easy to see in ACCTivate because we fully trust Avalara to get the proper sales tax calculation. And one of the things that we've had in discussions with them and some of our customers using Avalara, once you sign up with Avalara in ACCTivate, you don't really have to worry about sales tax. If you do get audited and auditors come in, the first thing you're going to do is tell them we use AvaTax. And AvaTax is so much more powerful than any audit or any manual sales tax calculations are ever going to be. So you can show them a few examples and you'll find they're all perfect. So let's go ahead and create the invoice and I'll show you what it looks like today. So again, in ACCTivate, we just show you the final result. We don't need to worry about it. It's complicated. We understand that. It's going to get more complicated. But we do know that it is accurate, and if your customers question it, you can explain it by looking in the AvaTax Console. So let's go to AvaTax real quick. So we'll log into the AvaTax Console. And when we go to the Transactions tab, you'll see here's the ACCTivate sales order that came in. And I'm not going to explain this whole console. I'll leave that up to Jordan and the Avalara team. But just want to show off the fact that they are calculating and getting all the jurisdictional details at the line level from ACCTivate, which this is the only way to get this level of sales tax calculation into ACCTivate. We've ran into a number of customers asking for AvaTax. One of the ones that I remember the most was the scenario, a customer that was in Florida selling expensive items that are actually above $5,000. They were selling large industrial equipment, and it was actually radiology equipment. And one of the quirks in Florida is that the first $5,000 are taxed differently than everything beyond $5,000. And in ACCTivate, what they were doing as a workaround was they would have to put in the full product as non-taxable and then have a credit and then another debit line. It was a mess. But again, with Avalara, they could simply do one line and not worry about it because AvaTax is going to calculate it perfect each time. Now, I do want to spend just a little bit of time going through a couple other scenarios and things that you should be aware of. One of the things with Avalara is that you'll need to carefully look at your configuration management. In the past, you may not have had to set up the warehouse address for customer shipping. It didn't really matter. So if you were dealing with vendors that you weren't submitting POs on paper or whatever, be sure that you validate this address and it's completely correct for both warehouses and then also customer branch. So ACCTivate will pass in the branch address as the point of sale, the store location. They will also pass in the warehouse location as the source, the ship from, and then we will also use the customer's ship to address and the customer's bill to. So as you can see, there's 4 addresses on every transaction that is submitted to AvaTax. So it's important that you get all of that set up right. Another thing to be aware of, as I mentioned before, that you can set up, this is the way it works today, it's pretty simple, the address validation. There's a wildcard, so you can say all addresses get validated using Avalara with the exception of South Africa. And that's just the example I pulled today. If you really want to get this better tuned, then you would actually have to type in the country for every customer address you enter in. So if you're not doing a lot of international business, but you have a few countries you ship to, I would encourage you to use this setting where the star, the wildcard goes to Avalara, and then just put in all the others with no validation. Okay? The other thing you can do, and you should be aware of, is when you get started with ACCTivate, you have the option to try it out in your model or your practice company. So under sales orders options, you can switch between using Avalara or you can disable it by using our built-in tax calculation method, which is the real basic method that gets your tax rates from your accounting system. So if you are going to use Avalara, I would encourage you to start out in your model company. And in AvaTax, you can also set up a secondary company code, and that'll let you test it. So I definitely encourage you to try this out in your model company. Make sure everything's configured before you go live. Okay? So that's pretty much it. We have a couple options. It's very easy because all the heavy lifting is handled by AvaTax. As I close out of the demo, I want to hand it back to Jordan to kind of go through the dashboard, or how AvaTax works with the dashboard, and then we'll close up. So again, we're going to try to keep this pretty quick for you guys today. Okay, Jordan, are you ready?
Perfect. So everybody, Brian's already shown you the AvaTax console, but I'm going to give you a really high-level full walkthrough of it here in just a few moments. So let's go ahead and jump into it. When you log in to our AvaTax console, you hit a home screen, what we like to call a landing page. It's going to give you access to service notices and account alerts for AvaTax, and it's going to give you a small summary of your sales tax liabilities right down below here. At the very bottom, you have access to training guides and training videos and our support group. That's all right here on your home screen. Let's jump over to the Organization tab, and let's jump right into that Transactions tab. Now, Brian and I are using different Transactions tabs, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up my company here in my console. But what I will tell you about the Transactions tab is it's really a reporting engine that's going to allow you to see any transaction you've ran through our system going back over 7 years. It defaults to the current day, though, so it's very easy to find a calculation that you made earlier in the day inside of AvaTax. As you can see here, I ran one transaction today, and go ahead and click into it. What you're going to see when you click in is you're going to see these 4 dialog boxes at the top. This is going to be your bill to, ship to information, and then some other applicable information for your calculation below. As you can see here, we shipped to 2301 North Highland Avenue in Hollywood for this example. And down below, we've got our 2 line items. So in this case, our line item was a big machine and some freight. Let's go ahead and see what taxing jurisdictions applied to this invoice. So that big machine, well, that big machine was actually tied to a tax code that Avalara can help companies manage. But this one's P with 7 zeros, or tangible personal property. So in this case, what happens is when Avalara and our AvaTax engine has a line item that would come over from ACCTivate that we do not recognize, we default everything to tangible personal property, fully taxable to all taxable customers. The reason why we do this is because that is a best practice, because when in doubt, tax it. It also helps out for customers that have thousands of items that they sell, and they don't want to have to go through and tell us what each individual item is. They know it's taxable to every taxable customer, like those tables and chairs I talked about earlier. They don't really need to tell us what that item is because we're going to tax it. So, 2301 North Highland Avenue. There are 3 different taxing jurisdictions that apply. There's a California state tax of 6.5%. There's an LA County tax of 1%. And then there's an LA County Transportation Commission special tax of 1.5%. Now, if you work your way over here to the right, you're going to see that we flagged that piece of tangible personal property as fully taxable, and we've returned the tax due per jurisdiction over here on the right. Now let's go to the second line item, freight. Now freight is tied to a tax code that Avalara actually manages that's for shipping only, common carrier, FOB destination, backwards compatibility. What that means is that on this invoice, you are passing the cost of the freight on to the customer and you're not marking it up. Well, in the state of California, as you can see here from our calculation, that is considered a non-taxable event, and we return $0 tax due on that invoice. Now, let's say I change this ship to destination to Austin, Texas. Well, guess what? This freight would become taxable, and we would shift it over to taxable and tax that $100 properly based on the ship to location. So we handle, once you're tied to any of our tax codes, and we manage about 2,000 different types, anything from freight, like you see here, all the way up to your software and software maintenance agreements, or medical devices, or food, or you name it, basically. You map that item code that you have for your product or service to our tax codes, and we're going to manage the proper taxability for any invoice you send through our system in any state you need to start collecting into. So this is the Transactions tab, everybody. You can print this out. You can send this to customers if they have questions about your calculations, and chances are, after they've seen this level of detail, you're not going to hear back from, again, about the taxability or the tax calculation you made. But let's jump back to that Organization tab that I skipped over. As you can see here in the Organization tab, this is where you set up your company's sales tax profile. So as you can see here, I've got a parent company with multiple different subsidiaries. So we can handle complex corporate structures if you have one. Let's go ahead and work over here to Nexus. This is where you select your Nexus jurisdictions. As Brian has already mentioned, we have a capability of doing VAT and GST calculations in over 100 countries outside of the United States. So I'm going to go through my list of countries here, get to the U.S. at the very bottom. Go ahead and select the U.S. When I jump into the U.S. here, you're going to see a list of the states and territories with checkboxes next to them. You can literally come into our system and click a checkbox if you need to start collecting in Georgia and Florida here, and save it. Once you've saved that in our system, we will properly calculate sales tax based on the ship to location or any invoices we see come through for those new states. Now, you still need to go through all the formality of getting registered in that state and getting us that information so we can help file your returns, but it's that easy to start collecting sales tax in a new state with AvaTax. Now, the next items, tax codes, tax rolls, and items. This is where you will map your product and services to our tax codes, just like I showed you with that freight tax code. Not going to go into detail here, but I will tell you that you are required, when you sign up for AvaTax, to have a call with our tax code experts where you can go over any questions you have about how your product or service matches up exactly to our different tax codes. We want to make sure that all of our customers are set up properly, so that's why we require it. And then here's the last item, exemptions. If you have any exempt customers, you can log into our system and put their information in from ACCTivate, and when we see invoices come through for that customer, we will notate $0 tax due, and we'll make proper notations to the tax returns so you file correctly across all the states you have to file in. So that's the Organization tab. Once you get your profile set up, get your Nexus selected, and you're mapped to our product and service tax codes, you're always going to calculate tax properly in our tax engine. Now to the last piece of the puzzle, the tax returns. At the beginning of every month, you can log into our system. You pull up what we like to call a liability worksheet. What a liability worksheet is it's a state-by-state level detailed report of the previous period's sales tax liabilities you created. So let's go ahead and jump into California here. As you can see here in California, got a little sliver of the pie, which is actually something called a monthly prepayment that the state requires from a lot of businesses. And then you've got a quarter of the pie, which is actually your quarterly return to the state. So let's look at sales last month. Looks like you had $114,000 in sales. Of that, 91,150 of it was taxable sales. And that created a liability for you of $7,975. Well, this is a prepayment, so 90% of that amount is due at this time. So we go ahead and automatically calculate the 90% that's due at this time, accrue that extra 10% towards the quarter-end return. And if it's good and you do not need to make any adjustments for prepayments or prior payments, all you have to do is select Approved from this dropdown. You can work your way to the bottom. You'll have a full liability amount listed right here, and you're going to save this. After you've saved the liability worksheet, you have an ACH account set up with Avalara, and we're going to pull that exact liability amount from that account, and we're going to create, file, and remit all of your returns for you on your behalf. Now, we guarantee to do every return on time and correctly in the proper format, and if you're privy to an early filing discount, we make sure that is credited back to you, and we provide you full access to documentation showing all the returns we filed. Also, if you do happen to receive a notice from any of the states for a return we filed, you forward that our way, and we're going to handle that as well as part of the service. So guys, that basically concludes my presentation of our AvaTax dashboard. Gone through how you look at transaction detail, how you get it set up, and then how you file the returns with AvaTax. Let's go ahead and I'm going to jump back in. Got a couple minutes here. Brian, I know you wanted to finish up about 55, you were saying?
Yeah, that's fine. We got about 10 minutes. You're good.
So go ahead and jump into some questions, everybody. Again, my name is Jordan Lang. I'm with Avalara, and that is my direct contact information. Please do not hesitate if you have a AvaTax specific question that you would like to get answered to give me a phone call or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to get back to you with the right answer. So, Zach, I know you've been monitoring the questions. I was trying to do it as we got going here. What's been some of the most common things that have been asked that I can address for the entire group here?
Sure, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, we have quite a few users asking a few questions regarding how they should be remitting sales tax or how it's actually calculated, dependent upon the state. An example of that would be that in some states, shipped from location is the requirement. In other states, it's the ship to location. Can you touch on that?
Absolutely. And Brian, you did a great job at explaining how origin sourcing works in Texas. Guys, Texas is one of only a handful of states that has a requirement, but any of those states that those requirements are necessary, AvaTax has all the capabilities to handle those scenarios. And even in a state like California that has something called hybrid sourcing rules, where it actually depends on what city you're shipping to and what city you're shipping from, that determines the proper sales tax to actually calculate. We have all that functionality built into our system, and you set it up. And as you saw, it's pretty easy to dictate where inventory is coming from, and we will take all that into consideration when you're invoicing inside of ACCTivate to get you a proper sales tax calculation.
Fantastic. And Brian, were you going to touch on your question on dropships and conferences?
Yeah, actually, I can ask Jordan those questions, and then I've got one that just came in that that I can answer. Jordan, the question was, does AvaTax support dropship scenarios where we are actually there's two sides to that, but I think my understanding of the question is our customers will actually have an order drop shipped from their vendor directly to their end customer. So usually the vendor's address will be on the purchase order, not the customer sales order. I guess my question is, I think the 4 simple addresses always apply. Is that true that where it was sold from, where it was shipped from, the warehouse address, And in this case, that would be the vendor's address. Is that correct, or maybe this is something that needs to be looked at on a case by case basis?
It's totally case by case. And here, I'm going to give you guys a quick example. Let's say you're a vendor based in California, and you only collect sales tax in California, but one of your vendors is based right there in Arlington, Texas, and your customer called you, and they want one of your items, and they want it shipped to Fort Worth. Well, if you do not have the requirement to collect sales tax in the state of Texas, then it's up to your vendor to make sure tax is collected on an intrastate sale, because your vendor has to calculate sales tax for any company that buys product from them within the state if they do not provide an exemption certificate. So if that's the case, then there's only a couple options, and the options are pretty simple, but I'll go ahead and explain them. The first one is you can ask your vendor if they will remit the sales tax if you calculate it. Some vendors will say yes, but that's not that common. Another one is to eat the sales tax, have the vendor calculate the sales tax for you and pay it, and just take that out of your margin. And then the third option is to get registered in the state where your vendor's at and know that you need to calculate sales tax in another state for all your sales in that state, including drop ships from the vendor that's located in that state and any sales you make into that state from other locations. That's how you handle drop shipping. And if you want to go into that in detail, please pick up the phone and give me a call. I'd be happy to have a conversation about your scenario, or shoot me an email and we can try to figure out how your scenario should be looked at.
Sounds good. And I've got one more question that I'll answer, and then I've got one more for you as well before we wrap up. There was a question that we did miss in our demo, and I really should have covered it. The question is, how do you handle credit memos and returns? And that's a big deal with sales tax. And I'll tell you the way ACCTivate works today. When you do a credit memo in ACCTivate, there are two dates that are important. There's the actual date of the credit memo for accounting purposes, when you are adding the credit to the customer's account. And then there's what we call the tax calculation date. And that allows you to backdate the credit memo to provide the proper sales tax credit at the time of the original order. And this only really is going to be a problem for you when you're crossing that threshold of when a sales tax rate changes. And I know in Texas previously, I think we had like an April 1st change. So, if you had a sales order today on March 18th, and then you had a credit memo, the customer comes in and returns it on April 15th, and the sales tax rate has changed, ACCTivate will actually provide the credit memo at the original sales tax for that original sales order. You can actually change the credit memo, the order date really is what it is, and we can show you that on screen later, but you just change the date on the credit memo proof, the order, and then you use a different date for the credit memo invoice, the actual AR transaction. So there is a way in ACCTivate and with Avalara to properly handle credit memos that cross over tax boundaries. So it's very interesting. The only other question I had, Jordan, I think this is a pretty standard thing, but the question is, customers, would this handle a scenario where you're selling products at conferences, where you're taking an order at a different physical location, maybe in Las Vegas at a conference center, but then you're going to ship it later on from your office? I think the same rules apply. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. Now, if you're taking an order in Las Vegas and you're present there and you're soliciting sales in Las Vegas, you most likely have Nexus in the state of Nevada, so you need to be registered for sales tax in Nevada, and then you could calculate sales tax based on the ship-to location for your product. Now, if you don't have a live internet connection and you're trying to make sales, there's a couple different ways to handle it, and it's all done on a case-by-case basis, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone directly that has questions. We have hundreds of customers that are in that scenario, and every one of them is a little different, and we can help you with your scenario in a best practice if we can have a conversation.
Sounds good. As always, we've got a lot of questions written in. If you've got any additional questions, please reach out to Jordan, or definitely start with the ACCTivate sales team as well if you have questions about how it works with ACCTivate and how to get started.
Absolutely. So first off, everybody, thanks for attending. I hope that you found this informative and that you found out how you can handle your sales tax scenario with using Activate and AvaTax together. So if you definitely have interest in further exploring the use of AvaTax with your Activate 9.0 installation, please go ahead and pick up the phone, give me a call, or shoot me an email, and we'll set up a time where we can talk about your scenario, and we can talk about what it would cost for you to start using AvaTax to handle your sales tax compliance.
Avalara and Activate sales tax calculations may not be something that's on your radar today because you haven't had that requirement yet. It's coming very soon. So if you are selling out of state, selling nationally, sign up with it. It will make your life a lot easier. You're going to get the proper sales tax calculated. You're not going to get in trouble with any of these audits. If you're thinking about setting up your e-commerce web store, rest assured that Activate is fully integrated with most of the popular shopping carts such as Magento, Volusion, and they also support Avalara. So you can get started today with Activate and with your web store fully integrated with the sales tax online automation. And then also, you'll be ready for when the streamlined sales tax is required nationally, and every order you place, you're going to have to charge their local sales tax. And we do believe that's coming soon. That's why we're spending so much time in development and now into marketing of this product. So we think it's a great solution for all of our wholesale distribution customers, and especially all of our customers looking to get into e-commerce or already working with e-commerce. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you again, Jordan, for helping us out with the presentation. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brian.